Good afternoon, everyone. It is David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Thursday, July 10th, 2025. In this update, I'm going to give you the very latest information on what's going on in the main development region of the Caribbean, as well as most of the MDR in the Atlantic, as well as the Gulf and the Western Atlantic across the Bahamas, because things are looking pretty quiet right now, but that's not going to last as we go into the latter part of July into early and middle of August. So if you haven't been here before and you do like these detailed tropical weather outlook and discussions that I do create on an everyday basis, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell notification icon, hit that like button, so give that like a huge nudge, as well as leave an awesome comment in the section below this video, and I'll be happy to reply back as soon as I can. Now, with that being said, here's a look at the very latest GOES 19 True Color Visible Satellite imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There will be a link in the description below this video. And as we can see here, this has been the theme over the last several weeks, where we have had a lot of dry, stable Saharan air in place, not necessarily super dusty, but also not very moist either. We can also see this when looking at the cloud cover, see this stratocumulus field. This indicates that the air mass aloft is really dry, it is warm, and it is quite stable. And that's not what we want to see when looking for the development of tropical waves that come off of Africa. You can even see the leading edge of it right here where that dry, stable air layer actually is. And this is going to be moving into the Caribbean, morphing any development at least for the next 5 to 7 days, and then eventually moving potentially into the Gulf, where it might prevent anything from forming. However, though, there is a weak disturbance that we will need to monitor in days to come, especially once it gets up here into the northern Gulf, where we will talk about that briefly. But also something interesting here is we do have the beginnings of a lot of convection that is moving or that has developed in the far eastern Atlantic right off the coast of Africa. This is likely due to a weak impulse of upward motion, or what is known as a convective coupled Kelvin wave that is straddling the area, but that will soon decrease briefly before it resurges again as we get another passover of the MJO. So here's a look at what Twitter is telling us, and this is from Bobby Storm. Go follow her. There will be a link in the description below this video leading to that post. So again, please be sure to check her out. She is very, very good at what she talks about when it comes to the tropics, and here she has 6248 followers. So again, go follow her if you can. And what she is saying here is this is a signature we've seen before many years. We are very close to realistically watching the wave train from Africa. So what she is saying here is that the convective nature here, let's zoom back here, is beginning to show itself. As we get into climatology, the background state slowly tilts into a more optimal environment. It doesn't happen overnight or over the next couple of days. It takes about a couple of weeks for this to happen. And once things click into place, we will start seeing more stronger waves coming off of Africa. Now, it doesn't mean they will develop or they won't develop, but when we have tropical waves that are stronger, we have convection that stays within the wave envelope, we tend to get more concentration of lower pressure that tends to form. So with that being said, here's a look at the very latest GFS model known as the Global Forecasting System, or the American model, for Thursday afternoon on the 10th of July. And what we're looking at here is a 3-plot system of what we're seeing here as an image. So the first thing that I like to point out is our color shading. That is where we have vorticity. Yellow shading indicates lighter or lesser vorticity or spin in the atmosphere, versus orange and red colors indicate stronger spin and vorticity in the atmosphere. And then of course your wind barbs tell us which way the wind is blowing from and how strong it is, versus our lines here of heights. This tells us where we have a ridge of high pressure is in, where it's at, and how strong it is, because that gives us an idea how our subtropical ridge is behaving in the lower parts. So let's put this into motion and let's see what happens. Over the next 3 days, nothing unusual. Nice good ridge of high pressure down here in the subtropics of the Atlantic. However, though, there is still some disagreement, but there is still a consensus that something does try to consolidate, or not really consolidate, but form down here right off the coast of Florida, and then it tries to retrograde and build or form back up as it moves and swings to the left into the Gulf. And this can develop in a rapid fashion here, because if we zoom closer, you can see there is our disturbance. So as this kind of again comes off the Carolina coast, it retrogrades and it backs into the Big Bend of Florida, and it does try to consolidate a little nicer. No sort of tropical storm force winds on this, with winds only about 20 to 25 miles an hour, but it is something to consider because that's a lot of rainfall. Yeah, that's a very heavy amount of rainfall in a short amount of time on the GFS in that given area. And again, I want to be very, very clear here. It doesn't matter if it's a hurricane or if it's not a hurricane or if it's a tropical depression or a storm. It's not going to really matter, because what's going to matter a whole lot is how much moisture gets advected in, how much lift in the atmosphere there is, and just how much energy there is available for this system to transport. And so we're more than likely going to see quite a bit of rainfall regardless of if it is or isn't a named storm. And that's the whole point here, is impacts win over just like, oh, it's not a Cat 5 at least, we don't need to worry. No, that's an understatement. So looking at the Canadian model here, the CMC is also showing something a little similar here. Again, you can see that bow back look to the back or bent back cold front as it comes off the eastern seaboard, and then it bows back like this. And you can see moving forward, it just doesn't, the Canadian model doesn't see it as much as the GFS, but it is definitely there, where we do have a pocket here where we have flow doing this, and where we have weak flow doing something like this. It kind of bends back around before another trough kind of sets in stone over the Midwest in about 7 days. So this would be in a time frame for the early to the middle of next week, bringing lots of rainfall, some gusty winds, that sort of thing. Any significant development with that does not look very likely, but that doesn't mean we will not see a disturbance at all. And everyone along the Big Bend of Florida, Georgia, and even northern Florida do need to be watching this system closely. And then as we go forward, actually, I forgot to finish my GFS model. Oh my goodness. As we go forward here, we don't see anything significant at all on the GFS model and even on the Canadian. However, there is a nice good tropical wave that is being indicated here on the Canadian all the way out to about 10 days. And this is kind of the tilting of the teacup, or in other words, tilting the barrel to pour water out of. Think about going to a water park. The barrel is almost ready to tip over and pour water on you. That's kind of where we're at here. And this is the 19th of July. So again, our first symptom we're going to look for is stronger waves coming off of Africa. Can they hold together? Can they ingest enough moisture where it kind of kickstarts the process? Here's a look at the European model. As we move this forward, you can see right here, there is a weak disturbance right in here. So again, off the coast of the Big Bend of Florida, otherwise nothing much with that. GFS being a bit aggressive. And then here's that intertropical convergence zone that is tilted in such a way that we are going to need to start watching these waves. And then out to 10 days, 12 days, just nothing out there. But I want to make it clear, it's only the 25th. And what I'm about to show you will tilt this video out a little bit. So let's actually go to our ensembles here and show you with what we have here. So of course, this is the European ensemble, all 51 members that run the ensemble. Again, there are some members over here over the northern portion of the Gulf showing at least a tropical depression or lower, so nothing too significant, but there is some members picking that up. But also more importantly, there are some members out here picking up some early on activity within the next 7 to 10 days. We will need to see if the clustering or the plumes of clustering increase on these disturbances out here in the MDR right off of the intertropical convergence zone. Even the GFS indicates the same thing. Again, a weak signal out here, not a signal that there's nothing there. There's definitely something that could pop up. We'll keep an eye on that in days to come. And of course, over here off the coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, there is some convergence in agreement that something might develop here. Just how quick and when is going to be the question. All right, really quickly, I wanted to show you all how much rainfall is expected here, because some of you are probably asking, how much rainfall are we anticipating? Well, if you just look at the GFS and the 12Z output, it wants 10 to maybe 15 inches of rainfall here. Now, if we look at prior model runs, it's been kind of back and forth. This is the most aggressive run where it wants rainfall totals anywhere between 4 to 8 inches, with some areas here maybe up to about 10 inches, which would be quite a bit of rainfall in a short amount of time. Another significant flood problem that Florida does not need to have, including for southeastern Georgia as well as the Carolinas, which got hit enough with heavy rainfall from our last disturbance. Looking at the latest NHC forecast here, we can see over the next 7 days that there is nothing to be concerned about at all. But I want to warn you, we are going to need to, again, watch for the northern and northeastern Gulf. Something might be highlighted there in the next day or two, depending on how confidence trends do on these models, on the ensembles, but at least out here is definitely looking very inactive, at least until further notice, until the very end of July at least. So now that we talked about our global computer models and their ensembles at if there or won't be development out there, here's another way we can visualize that it is not just looking at global models, but we also look at ensembles on the MJO, which stands for Madden-Julian Oscillation. Again, that is Madden-Julian Oscillation. This is a tropical variability that rotates around the equator that takes about 30 to 90 or 60 to 90 days. It can take as long as 90 days if it really wants to, or can go as fast as maybe 30 to even 45 days, however it is. This is what we really watch for. So as you know, the MJO has been in a very, very sleepy phase, and that is likely due to the fact that we had a lot of modes of tropical variability, including convective coupled Kelvin waves, a lot of Rossby wave activity over much of the Western Pacific as well as Africa, including for the Eastern Pacific, and that has allowed, again, for some brief episodic periods of heightened tropical activity in the Eastern Pacific. And that's why we are already on our letter, our next name would be letter G in the Eastern Pacific. Yeah, it's been a busy one there. However, as we can see here, things are going to be changing after a very long hiatus, a slumber in the MJO in this unit of circle. Things are going to be moving out of that unit of circle, perhaps by the latter part of July into early August. Here, as we can see, this blue line, which indicates where the MJO is actually headed. Now, the European model has a less amplified version of this MJO, but we need to be clear here what we're looking at. This is the mean average. There are some members that keep this in the unit of circle, meaning there's no MJO activity, likely the continuation here of Rossby wave activity, as well as a convective coupled Kelvin wave, which is a more minier version of the MJO. But there are some members that bring this pretty far out, more amplified signal into phases 5, 6, and 7, and that would, again, cover the Western Pacific. What I'm about to show you here, too, will clearly state that. But this is going to likely be a fast-moving MJO signal as it quickly circles probably into phases 8 and 1, and there are early signals that will be happening as we go into early August. Here's another way to visualize this, and this is very, very amplified by all means. I mean, look where our MJO is now, and this is where it's going to be headed here on the GEFS RMM guidance, indicating that we are going to see a very, very possibly a hyperactive mode of the MJO into phases 6 as we go into the latter part of July. Now, of course, phase 6 is not ideal for tropical development in the Atlantic, but it won't take much as this circles all the way back into phase 1. Usually here, phase 1, 2, and 3, and usually sometimes 1, but mainly 2, 3, and 4 are very active areas where the Atlantic wakes up because of the MJO passing over Africa into the Indian Ocean as well as Indonesia, maritime continent. So with this in mind, with this being very amplified, well, what does this mean when we take a look at our European ensemble prediction system? Ensemble mean this is a Hov-Moeller diagram showing us in what parts of the world across the tropics, roughly 15 south, 15 north in latitude, what parts down here are going to see upward motion and downward motion. Anytime you get downward motion, not directly underneath this bubble, usually get subsidence, warming, drying, and an unfavorable lot of vertical wind shear that typically happens. But there is something unique about this because once we go into August, because of the lag minting of the oscillation index that happens usually at the, I'm not really going to get into this in this part of the video, there's usually a delay that happens between where this sinking motion happens in unison when things become unfavorable. So when we look at this, this is for July, so we can see activity should possibly ramp up in about here perhaps. So July 26th through the early part of August. This is well agreed upon with Ben Knoll as well as Andy Hazelton, which are very, very high reliable, as well as Eric Webb. You can follow them on X as well. They talk a lot about when things will wake up. And it should be by no surprise over here, especially when things will likely wake up, especially in early August. And I'm pretty confident in this. Unlike before, where we had a lot of variability, we now have a amplifying MJO signal that we could actually track, and we can see where it's going to head next because things go east with time. And usually, again, there's phases 1 through 4. This is really, really what we want to see here for a busier uptick in tropical activity in the Atlantic. And guess what? It happens to be when Dr. Bill Gray would ring his bell. Literally, he would ring his bell on the 20th or the 21st of August that this is the rapid uptick in tropical activity. And by no surprise, look where our MJO is going to be, perhaps our velocity potential anomaly in a pretty favorable area. Okay, now I have to move on here. This is also supported from the University of North Carolina, indicating, again, a very active amplified MJO phase moving through. And it does appear that we could also even have some weak Rossby wave activity too. That can make things a bit interesting, especially around the 23rd through the 26th of July. And then by early August, we might have another attempt here at this rotating. Actually, that is sinking motion on the MJO side versus rising motion. But of course, this is one map versus what we just looked at, and this is prone to changing. But right now, things do not look ideal for any basin right now for tropical activity, at least for the time being. Another thing that I wanted to show you too is the MJO has big influences on our trade winds and our wind circulation, including the Walker circulation as well. So since we're going to get into a very active MJO phase environment, we're going to get some pretty strong trade winds, and they're already strong now, and they're only going to get stronger than normal across the international dateline as well as the Eastern Pacific. This is going to help to restart the process of which La Nina might reappear here in the next few weeks. We'll keep an eye on that. A nice good westerly wind anomalies over 122 or 120 degrees east in longitude, and this is pretty almost conducive here. This is one impulse. Here comes another impulse rotating through. And so this is going to be the area to really watch from about roughly about 25 to 50 degrees east in longitude all the way over to 120. Because again, right here is when things get busy for the Atlantic, just how the MJO sets up. So another product that I wanted to show you too is the sea surface temperature configuration is a bit in question right now. I know a lot of people are saying that, oh, the Atlantic is running well above average. We have this warm patch of water in the Bermuda region. We have a patch of warmer than average water conditions over the Bay of Campeche, as well as the Northern Gulf, including for the Caribbean, and of course in the MDR, which has recovered quite nicely given the lackluster of trade winds that we've been far predicting over the last couple of weeks, how that would lead to some good warming in the MDR. However, we do have this weak La Nina, or what we call an Atlantic Nina, that is in place, and we're starting to see enough signal here that the Eastern Pacific is warming, but this is where there's a mixed signal at the same time. Okay. For one thing, we don't have, we have a good enough signal where we have warming in the Iberian Peninsula. That's a good thing that we're seeing for at least a mediocre season. More that gives us 15 named storms. Very, very negative PMM, Pacific Meridional Mode, as well as a PSM, which stands for Pacific Southern Meridional Mode down here. So as a whole, again, the Eastern Pacific dominates over the Atlantic, with the Atlantic dominating over the Eastern Pacific, with one basin being warmer than the other. You can kind of just make a footprint that a lot of sinking over here, more sinking or rising opportunities over here in retrospect to the velocity potential. So with this in mind, again, there is that mixed signal. Stronger wind shear values have been a thing over the last month or over the last couple of months over the Caribbean. So therefore, there is definitely a lot of questions about if this season is indeed going to be an above average one versus maybe an average one. And I'll give you my thoughts here towards the end of the video. Now I have to move on. Okay, this is going to end up being a really long one. So looking at what Binnell is tweeting here, this is July 11th. Again, take note, lots of sinking motion over the Atlantic. That's why we are not seeing anything at all. But watch what happens by July 19th. By July 27th, there is the upward motion moving over Africa. Please take note, things by August 4th. Let's put that right there. We can see some rising motion moving over India. So this is pretty good for an area for the deep tropics here to wake up. Again, at least in early August, very, very late July is still what I'm aiming for at this time. One other thing now, as far as sea surface temperatures, again, this is from Andy Hazelton. So we looked at Ben Knoll right here, and now Andy Hazelton. Again, links in the description below this video leading to these posts. We want to give them credit here on the channel. And you can see here, let me read this really quickly. The sea surface temperature anomaly configuration in the Atlantic right now is basically the reverse of last year's. So you can kind of read more about this. It's hard for me to imagine that this year's sea surface temperature configuration producing a hurricane season as busy as last year's. The MDR is really important in this case, but in retrospect, the cooling Canary Current should have been a red flag last year. All right. I also wonder if the warm subtropics around 30 degrees north allows this year to generate some activity in ACE there in the southwestern Atlantic, even if it suppresses the deep tropics some. So in other words, what he's trying to say here, let's go back to our sea surface temperature map for reference. Just because we don't see development here or here and here, we might see development over here, or even over here, or over here, or even over here. And worst of all, where a lot of people live in the Northeast, yeah. So it may not develop here, but a lot of homegrown storms, that is a certain possibility here for this year's hurricane season. Nor, if we don't get as many named storms as what we were predicting, doesn't always mean the season is not that active. ACE, folks, is very important. Quality meets quantity, all right, or beats quantity, in other words. So if you have 15 named storms, will those be long tracks or will they be short track named storms? That is a thing that we are going to need to watch very closely. But anyways, if you found this tropical weather outlook and discussion very detailed, helpful, and informative, and if you're new to the channel and if you haven't been here before, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. It really helps out a lot because we will be going live on a landfalling hurricane or tropical storm within 24 hours before it makes landfall near you, or if it does at all. And also, please be sure to hit that like button, give that like a nudge, and as well, don't forget to also leave a comment in the section below this video. All right, because as always, I love to do these tropical weather updates on a daily basis, as long as there's certainly something to talk about here, especially what is developing off of Western Africa. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with you more tomorrow.